Tony Weber, and today's show features Al Stewart and Jeff Healy. So stay tuned. We're at Peabody's Down Under, and we're with Al Stewart. Al, welcome to Cleveland.
Thank you very much.
And my first question for you, we got to get the cat right out of the bag. You're the cat.
Yeah.
We'll start out talking about that. A lot of people don't know that you had 6 albums before then.
Mm-hmm.
And You're the Cat was a tremendous seller here, and I've read that you don't know why it was such a big hit all of a sudden.
I don't think anybody knows why records are hits. The ones who make them to formulas do. I think that there are formulas within the music business. Dance records, for example, will go at so many beats per minute and have no more than 10 words in them, and they become hits because that's that style of music.
Mm-hmm.
But once you pass the dreaded 100-word mark in a song, you enter the domain of the Elvis Costellos, the Leonard Cohens, then your chances diminish rapidly of having a hit because you're disseminating too much information for the average listener to absorb. As a consequence, I was quite amazed. You're the Cat is one of my simpler songs, but even I thought it probably wouldn't be a hit single. In my wildest dreams, I never thought it would be. But it was, so it's nice.
Mm-hmm. So you never really figured out what a formula is, or you would never go by a certain formula?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. It's ooh, 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 I love you. Oh, I love you, I do, ooh, ooh, yeah. Or worse still, those heavy metal or ballads or basically heavy metal and dance music. I think are probably about 80% of the market now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the formula's pretty much image, But I didn't come in from rock and roll. I came in the back door via literature. So I have this thing about wanting to make syntax correct within popular music, which gets you into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. I heard historical folk rock, I've read, is you're the creator of. Maybe you can explain that a bit.
I started putting history into popular music with Past, Present, and Future in 1973. And I guess, I was writing about the German invasion of Russia, the murder of Ernst Röhm, the prophecies of Nostradamus, the song on Warren Harding.
This is good. I was a history major.
Oh, then you know this. This is very good. You know this stuff. A lot of people don't. Mm-hmm. One of the things I did last year, whoops, we're being interrupted. Send the cavalry away. There's a few Mycenaeans off stage causing trouble. Wait, things are still creaking. Coming up or going down? Right, okay, we're here. Right, what was the question?
Go ahead. It was about historical folk rock.
Oh, yeah. We did that in 1973, and it seemed to work. I had, up until then, written love songs. I think everyone who begins their career writes love songs first. Paul McCartney is right. Silly love songs do work. And I just got terribly, terribly bored, with love songs. I'd made them as complicated as I could. I had one that lasted 18 minutes. So it wasn't through lack of trying. It's just that I'd said everything possible about the subject, and it was like sort of take me away from this, And history, I thought, let's give this one a throw. It's the only other thing I knew anything about.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, sort of throwing. Russian history was what I was mostly involved with at the time. And through Solzhenitsyn, I came up with Roads to Moscow, and that worked deliriously. So I pursued it in all the subsequent albums, although I do put in goofy things like sort of Monty Python-esque things like Red Toupee. I mean, just, to sort of lighten things up.
I was just listening to that in the car, Red Toupee.
Very silly song.
I'd say so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about the last days of the century here a bit. Their song King of Portugal was the single and the video, very interesting video. Maybe you can tell us a little about that song.
There's not very much to tell. On every album, you try and do something that will be played on the radio. In my case, that's quite a stretch, because I don't like very much that's played on the radio, and if I love something, it's almost never played, But King of Portugal, basically, radio just revolves around choruses. Repetition will get you airplay. It's as simple as that. You want to be a rock star, repeat yourself. You want to be a rock star, repeat yourself. You want to be a rock star, repeat yourself. I mean, that's essentially what does it. Mm-hmm. So I into King of Portugal, which was this thing about dreaming you were going to be the King of Portugal, I did shove a chorus, which I think I repeated 3 times, and that's about as far as I'm prepared to compromise. And it was played on about 130 stations, so it was sort of median success, The video was shot in one day in black and white on a very, very shoestring budget, and it's sort of surreal. I mean, I don't really know what it was about. I sat down with the director and we discussed what it was going to
Had
be.
a dwarf in it.
Yes, it did. David Rappaport, who was in Time Bandits.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's been in lots of things. There's lots of episodes of The Young Ones as well. And I thought having the dwarf wanting to be the king was a kind of a cool idea.
Now, License to Steal is a song which is against lawyers. Now, maybe you can explain a little here. I went to law school year 2 and dropped out, so we have that in common, too.
That's very wise of you. I think that's a public service. I don't know whether you realize it. It really is. So, lawyers, yeah, I have very strong feelings. In fact, I advocate the use of limited nuclear warfare against lawyers. Essentially, we could kill all of them and it would be a better place, but I realize that that would be hard. Actually, public stoning, I'm told, is ecologically more sound than, sort of nuking them. So I think if we could round them up and on weekends have, families take their kids out and pelt them with rocks, it would be better.
Why do you have this deep hatred towards lawyers?
They're taking over the country. It's 700,000 now. It's going to double within the next couple of years. By the end of the century, there will be 1 lawyer to every 2 people in San Francisco. And it is not a public service. People get very confused. They think lawyers are there to help them. Lawyers are there to steal your money, pure and simple. That's all. It's a business. This is a business transaction. It is, in fact, protectionism. Only on it's legalized protectionism. 90% of the Congress are lawyers. 90% of the Senate are lawyers. I mean, we are. I think Mike Wallace asked the president of the Bar Association on 60 Minutes. He said, "Are we your prisoners?" And this guy said, "Yes," and smiled. And it's like, we are essentially the prisoners of lawyers, There are, I think, someone told me there are 32,000 of them in Washington, D.C. alone. All lobbying for everything under the sun. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And some bloodletting. Rather in the style, in 1381, Wat Tyler, during the Peasants' Revolt, managed to kill all the lawyers that he could find on his march to London. And he'd killed a severe amount of the clergy and also of the nobility, because they were the hated
Don't you think
class.
it's kind of a harsh stance to take toward them, though?
I don't think one can be too harsh with lawyers. I think they must be absolutely, wiped from the face of the planet, But there is another way of handling it. There are several wings. I'm president of an organization called ARG, which is the Association Against the Abuses of Attorneys, Retribution General Headquarters. And we plan ways of disposing of them. And the retribution part is what appeals to me. We have a liberal wing which says that if we could, in fact, get rid of all of them tomorrow by capping their salary at, say, $25,000 a year, as they're only in it for money, that would eliminate probably 99.9% of them.
You don't think there's a public defender out there doing it for the cause?
If there's one in the 700,000, I haven't met him. I gotta tell you.
What about Josephine Baker? Let's get into her a bit.
Well, she was certainly not a lawyer, and that is a start. That's we. This is a quantum leap into respectability.
I hear you've compared her to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, I did. They both had to go to Europe to make it. Josephine Baker did it 40 years before Jimi Hendrix. She went to Paris at the age of 16 and took the city by storm. She was the toast of the town for all the way through the 20s, and had a remarkable life. Some controversy over whether she did or did not join the French resistance during World War II. She received the Medal of Honor for it. She became a member of the Legion of Honor. Started this home for kids of every different nationality, went bankrupt, got bailed out by Princess Grace, just lived this remarkable life, made a comeback at the age of 69 and danced till 4 o'clock in the morning, drank champagne and died, I think, at about 4 a.m. One of her adopted sons said she died of joy. But she had to go to Europe to make it because she was black and she lived in St. Louis and it was the 1920s and there was nowhere for her to go. Hendrix repeated the formula 40 years later, but he translated back to America. Josephine Baker is still like a cult in America, but still a star in France.
What about, I want to get into a little of the 60s club scene that you were involved in London. How would you compare the scene now, today, as compared to back then?
Well, I have no idea what goes on there now because I live in L.A. and have done since the mid-70s. We were talking, funnily enough, about the club scene on the drive here. And in those days, I guess because we met everybody, when I first started, I shared a dressing room with the Rolling Stones that was, sort of a lot smaller than this. We opened for them in Reading Town Hall. I remember sort of, wandering around with Brian Jones's old green guitar and whatever, and talking to Mick. And then I met the Beatles, and it was sort of not really a big deal. It was sort of pre-supergroup. Even in the mid-'60s, when I was going to lots of rock clubs in London, it was still like sort of before the age of the supergroup, and musicians pretty much talked to each other. And then I think probably around about '68, there was this movement towards going to the country and getting it together, man, which really just meant taking $100,000 off the record company and buying lots of dope and smoking in the country house. And then groups became, I first heard the name, like supergroup, applied to, say, 10 years after. The Beatles weren't a supergroup, So at that point, it all got a little out of control. And then punk came along, and it sort of all got back to its roots again, and I have no idea where it is now. As I said, I very rarely go to London, and when I do, I don't go to clubs, which is odd, because when I was a kid, I used to live in them. I don't think I was at home for one night. For a period of 2 or 3 years, I was out every single night in clubs.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I just lived in clubs all the time.
Now, would you say sincerity has left music a lot?
No. All praise to Mike Scott and the Waterboys for, sort of for what they're doing.
Hello.
You want to be on television? All praise to Michelle Schock for what she's doing. Sinead O'Connor is crazy, but I love her. I mean, I think she's a great writer. And Leonard Cohen continues to be the major lyrical force, besides Elvis Costello, obviously, in popular music, and goes from strength to strength. His last album is a work of genius. So, yeah, I mean, but I can only talk about lyricists. If you want to talk about music, I mean, I don't know one end of a musical instrument from another, and I don't really, frankly, care. I mean, I'm interested in words. But there are some good writers around, I can tell you that.
I'd like to name some Americans. What about Tracy Chapman or Suzanne Vega?
I don't want to get into trouble, so I hover around it. Yeah, Suzanne Vega, yes. Tracy Chapman, I mean, maybe. I can tell you after a few more albums. This is a little obvious. We're in Stingsville here, sort of, it's a little Orwellian, for me. George Orwell, I mean, read Animal Farm, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Sloganeering is so easy. It's so completely easy. I mean, Adolf Hitler proved that. You just tell the public what they want to hear and project the right image, and they think you're marvelous, and they follow you in droves, to the extent that there are heavy metal bands now whose concerts resemble the Nuremberg rallies. I mean, it's like more than anything else, And the flip side of Tracy Chapman is, unfortunately, the Horst Wessel song. And they are part and parcel of the same coin. They're just reverse sides. Much the same probably applies to Billy Bragg. So, I mean, I wanted to grow over the next few albums, and then I'll tell you. Okay. I mean, I think Fast Car is terrific, but I mean, is she as advanced along the road as, say, Joni Mitchell? No, of course not.
Let's talk a little bit about your band here, and you're on tour now. Maybe you could tell us how they got together, and what do you think about touring again?
Well, I don't know. Got them a dark night in Bangkok out of a brothel. Peter White joined us as a piano player, and then we discovered he could play Spanish guitar, which he's been doing ever since Year of the Cat. Dave Camp plays saxophone. He's our token American. We've got one American. Robin Lamble plays bass and has done, and Steve Chapman plays drums and has done since the mid-'70s. So, with the exception of Dave, they've all been around since the middle of the '70s.
It's a pretty extensive tour I saw on the tour.
Yeah, so it's a ridiculous tour because it began back in September. I mean, it's and here we are in February, and we're moving into March, and so it's almost the sort of the never-ending tour. There were a lot of towns that I hadn't played, like Columbus. I just played. I hadn't been there since I think '76. And there was this whole swathe through the Midwest, where after a while I just didn't come to the middle because I was working on the coasts pretty much all the time. I just couldn't get arrested in the middle, so I thought, well, forget it, let's not go there, And this time around we've had, sort of really good houses all the way across the middle, and it's sort of, this now resembles, Philadelphia was always our best town, you know, but Cincinnati, we had this alarmingly good gig in the other night, so maybe the Midwest has joined the map of America for me, but for a while there, like there was, you know, New York and Los Angeles, there was nothing in between.
Well, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
I think it applies to singer-songwriters. For the longest time, it was like this. The middle was Rocksville, you know, sort of Kiss, and you know, sort of, yeah, that was what the middle was all about. So maybe I don't know, maybe it's developing sensitivity. What can I say? I'm insulting millions of corn-fed Americans here. Well, have them all out reading Jane Austen next. Never know what will happen. You know.
What do you see as history in the future here? Are we all going to blow up, or what's going to happen?
Well, Nostradamus says there'll be a third Antichrist, and 2/3 of the planet, of the people on the planet, will die. Rather unfortunately, he doesn't give us the name of this gentleman, but he refers to him as the man in the blue turban. I can tell you where the first two Antichrists came from, both as a historian and as an interpreter of the works of Nostradamus. Historically speaking, Antichrists come if you take Napoleon and Hitler as your two, although I don't know why we should, but that's what Nostradamus, those are the two he took, so fair enough. What you have is a war and a revolution. In the case of Napoleon, it was the revolution of 1789 that threw up Robespierre and Marat and people like that first, and then Napoleon took over. In the case of Hitler, of course, you know, the First World War threw up, you know, sort of Adolf Hitler, because the Second World War is only part two of the same thing. They had a decent interval to catch their breaths, and then they went back at it. And but the two wars are totally interconnected. In the case of, if I'm looking now for countries specifically to find my Antichrist in, I would say it must be the Middle East. I would say categorically, since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the chance of a nuclear exchange between the United States and the USSR has been minimal, despite the fact that every presidential candidate has played up the fear of the Reds. You know, I mean, this is just to get elected. In fact, it hasn't existed really since '62. Having said that, if it's going to be the Middle East, let's look for logical places. If it is the man in the blue turban, where have we recently had?
Well, the Ayatollah's got a black one.
Well. No, but think seriously. Well, Rafsanjani I saw wearing a blue one today. So, but where has there recently been a war? Iran and Iraq have just fought an 8-year war. If it were to be Iran, let us take the logical historical scenario. The Ayatollah would have to die, and the mullahs would have to be overthrown by a military officer who was at the front, for example. I mean, that would be a logical thing. The downside of this argument, which holds perfect historical water, is that Iran does not possess a nuclear capability. On the other side of the coin, of course, you have a Middle Eastern country which is very volatile and unpredictable, that has 200 nuclear warheads, if we believe Mordecai Vanunu, and why should we not, namely Israel.
Right.
Could it be possible that someone like a Meir Kahane could accede to power in Israel? Highly unlikely right now, but you know, sort of one consider these possibilities. You know, I would leave this to the imagination of your viewers if they have even heard of the people that we're discussing.
Are you doubting the intelligence of my viewers? The Midwest in general.
They know Meir Kahane. They know all about him. Yeah, right?
Well, I want to thank you for visiting with me.
Thank you very much.
In Cleveland, and we'll see you.
Channel 34, Cleveland Rocks. Do you remember the old song by Pete Townsend, My Generation? Here's an English translation of it. People attempt